To see News at 10 on Sky's satellite service, you'd have to stamp up an extra £144. On cable, a minimum of £185, and ITV's new digital service will cost £96 more. One former ITN man, now at Sky, thinks today's change was inevitable.
I realise, like many other people, that it was inevitable that the move was going to come, that we are in a new world of television now where there is more choice. Television is inevitably a more commercial undertaking now, and I think it was always going to happen. But I think personally, and as far as the journalistic history of British television is concerned, I think it is a bit of a sad day.
News at 10 has been a central part of the schedule since 1967, but over the years, the public service oligarchy in British television has been under pressure from new channels.
Advertisers are interested in reaching audiences, and the higher the audiences and the longer they can be sustained, the better. Typically, the News at 10 loses about a third of its audience across its run of an evening. There are other programmes that could be scheduled that would protect that audience, maintain it, on the biggest supplier of commercial audiences, ITV.
ITV's motivation for moving the bulletin is plain to see. During the 9 o'clock slot, they pick up 34% of the available audience. When the bongs of News at 10 go off, they seem to signify a mass switch-off, with audience share dropping to 29%. This is dangerously close to BBC One's 27% audience share. With the news gone, ITV will hope that they can maintain their previously high share. ITN's argument that a new, earlier bulletin will appeal to viewers in their tea-time slot of choice isn't backed by the facts. Our analysis of the last 6 weeks shows that ITN's early bulletin attracts just 4 million viewers. The BBC fares better at 5.5 million, but News at 10 doesn't look to be in terminal decline. In its present slot, it dishes its tea-time rivals with nearly 6 million viewers. One self-appointed voice of the viewer worries what'll take News at 10's place.
It would be a great pity, I think, if by this move of News at 10, that 2-hour slot between 9 and 11 is used for yet more violence and explicit sexual conduct, which I believe we have too much of already.
No stranger to real-life violence, the former war correspondent Martin Bell fears that the rage of commercialism will soon spread beyond the bounds of ITV. The next war will be a ratings war.
It's going to have an effect on the BBC operations, because it's going to make it seem to them as if they've got the field to themselves. Well, they haven't, because if they get complacent and they start to lose their audience, and they've lost more than is comfortable already, then what happens in the long run is the pressure is on the BBC to ease its news out of prime time. And then we're left with a wasteland on both channels.
Some ITN insiders say the move could be a disaster. This may not be the last we hear of News at 10. Well, earlier I spoke to the man responsible for the ITV schedule, the Director of Programmes, David Lidderman. I asked him whether he was proud to be the man who killed off Britain's best-known news programme.
I'm very proud of proposing a new schedule to the ITC that I believe will better serve the British public.
Now, will more people watch ITV at 10 o'clock after these changes?
I think so. One of the main drivers of this change was the unalterable fact that 27% of our audience switched off at 10 o'clock compared to about 10% that switched off other channels, and we just could not ignore that.
So you will be pleased, presumably, that more people will be watching at 10?
Absolutely.
So the truth of the matter is that the reason you wanted to get rid of News at 10 was in order that you could increase your audience?
It was in order that we could stop our audience declining and better, and you know, our audiences have changed. The news has been at 10 o'clock, and our schedule, as the structure of our schedule, hasn't changed for over 30 years. And as we looked at it, it seemed to us that if we're going to remain competitive in the increasingly competitive multi-channel world, we needed to make these changes so that we could continue to reach the kind of audience that we believe have got an appetite for what ITV has to offer them.
So when your apologists say the reason you did this was because people want to watch their news at 6:30 in the evening, we better take what they say with buckets of salt, hadn't we?
No, not at all. Part of what we're doing is about Well, everything we're doing was about looking at the totality of our schedule and the totality of our programmes and asking some questions that hadn't been asked before about how we better serve our audience. We believe that a news at 6:30 and a news at 11 in the end will better serve our audience.
But if you really believe that, all you had to do was to move the 5:40 news to 6:30.
No, we need it to do both, because the 10 o'clock news is an hour after the watershed, and we believe we can better serve our audience with having 2 hours after the watershed before we introduce the news.
You do accept, do you, that over the past 6 weeks, the news at 10 has been the most widely watched news bulletin on television?
Well, it varies from time to time. Over a year, the most watched news bulletin on television is the 6 o'clock news on the BBC.
Nothing to stop you running the 5:40 at 6 o'clock then? Or 6:30 or 7 o'clock?
Well, part of our proposal is to move the 10 o'clock news to 6:30 and to create a new news at 11 o'clock, which effectively replaces the 22/6 news.
But you do accept that over the last 6 weeks, news at 10 has been the most watched news bulletin in Britain?
Well, if you I haven't studied those particular
figures. Well, those are the
figures,
facts.
but if those are the facts, yes, I accept it. It may be the most watched news, I'll take your word for that, but news programmes, the rate of decline in news programmes, both on our channel and your channels, are at a much greater rate than the decline in anywhere else in the schedule. And the fact of the matter is that significant numbers, nearly 30% of our audience, switches off ITV at 10 o'clock. Now, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't take that very seriously and try to do something about it.
What were your pre-tax profits last year?
Oh, I've no idea.
They were £432 million. Why isn't that adequate?
You have to ask my shareholders that. My job is to construct the most effective schedule that serves our audience, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Isn't the fact of the matter, what we're seeing here is the end of the idea of, for perfectly understandable commercial reasons, but the end of ITV as a public service broadcaster?
Well, I'm prepared to be judged, and ITV is prepared to judge by the programmes that we offer our viewers. I don't believe that at all. The ITC don't believe that either, otherwise they would not have agreed to this. We believe that this will enable us to introduce a wider diversity of programmes and continue to operate as a public service commercial channel.